Hello. Happy Wednesday to everyone joining us wherever you are in the world. I'm happy to be here with all of you today. My name is Heather Grant. I am one of the community admins here at the Maintenance Community by Upkeep. Thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon. If you are not already a member of the maintenance community on Slack, we would love to have you join us. I will drop the link to sign up in the chat in just a moment. Today we have the one and only Bob Latino joining for a presentation on our safety and reliability a choice. I know it's going to be a super interesting, maybe a little bit new topic, but I'm excited to get started in just a minute. The recording from our session today will be available at this link right after we end our session, as well as in the maintenance community on Slack tomorrow, along with a copy of the slides that you see here today. Bob is also available to answer questions live in the Slack group, so please feel free to share the recording of this webinar or the invitation to Slack directly with any friends, colleagues, or anyone else you know who would benefit from hearing some of Bob's expertise. Last piece of housekeeping, and then we will get started with our presentation. You'll notice that your cameras and microphones are not turned on today. So what you want to do if you have any questions to ask Bob as we go through the presentation, you'll use the chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen. Feel free to chat your questions as they come up throughout the presentation, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can at the end of our time today. Anything we maybe don't get to, we will be sure to answer offline in the community as well. That is it from me. Thank you again, Bob, and everyone else for being here. Happy to get started with our presentation today. Bob, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Heather, and thanks to the rest of you for taking an hour of your day to listen to a guy like me. Okay, this is, like Heather said, this is a different type of presentation than is typical on the maintenance community. I deal a lot in the macro worlds of reliability and safety and the correlations and the causations between them. So I kind of want to make this an icebreaker session into future sessions that we'll hold about getting deeper into understanding why undesirable outcomes occur and getting into understanding human decision-making and human reasoning. I hope I'm going to be doing that in a palatable way and getting away from the academic and research communities where I spend probably too much time. Okay, I'm going to go through here. First things first, we got to start off with a little bit of fun here. And I was vacationing in a place here on the East Coast of the United States. And it's a little community called Manio, North Carolina. And this was 2 weeks ago after Hurricane Elsa came through. And this was at night, just at sunset, as the clouds from this storm were passing through. Is that not cool? You could see the reflection on the water. And this was from the front of the house. It was just an awesome view. And my friend Sonia from Trinidad, Mathura, she was telling me about the Sahara dust, where these storms pick up the sands, and then at the right time, with the right light, they produce images like these. Other than that, I just thought it was pretty cool. I want to show you. Okay, now let's get into the stuff that's not as pretty. Let's talk about reliability and safety, and their relationship to each other if they have one. I put purposely the graphics of silos here because in my experience, they often do act in silos. But I do want to, there is a connector here at the top, and I want to say that in the research communities, the people in reliability, and I'm one of them, believe that there is an absolute correlation between reliability and safety. That as my friend Ron Moore will say, from making common sense common practice, is a reliable plant, is a safe plant, is a profitable plant. But those in the safety community aren't as convinced of that. And I think it's because they will separate process safety from personal safety. And what I mean by that is that, you know, there's injuries that occur related to the reliability of the operation. And as you have steady state operations and reliability, it tends to be safer and people aren't hurt because there's not unexpected ups and downs. But then you have personal safety where, you know, I can get hurt in the parking lot. I can fall out of my chair in my office. I can, you know, get hurt in the break room, things like that. you still have injuries. So this is a different issue, and I'm going to talk today about reliability and safety as independent entities. But I did want to make the case to say that, from my standpoint, I'm a heavy believer, and I have some really long papers on this with the data, and Ramesh's data is included in that would show a correlation between reliability and safety. Okay, but let's look at causation and look at these two as silos, as individual entities. And I'm going to be focusing on reliability events that have undesirable outcomes, as well as safety events that have undesirable outcomes. So that's kind of my key up for the rest of this presentation. All right, where am I going with this? Sometimes I'm not even sure that I know. What are undesirable outcomes and where do they come from? Are they the result of choices? What makes an undesirable outcome analyzable? How do we properly analyze them? By incorporating the social science, the human stuff, into our investigations. And then I'm going to just touch on, what do people traditionally believe that RCA is, reliability and safety? Because that's part of the problem, is people's perceptions of these fields that are not accurate to the realities, to our realities. All right. This is just reiterating, I'm saying I often hear reliability and safety is discussed as if they are totally unrelated fields. Are they? I can tell you from the background of my company, a reliability center, there used to be a research and development group for a company called Honeywell 40 years ago. They actually merged reliability and safety because the commonalities were so stark. Okay, two key concepts I want you to get out of this presentation, but this is for life in general, okay? When you're dealing with failure reconstruction, I just want you to know that no matter where you work, where you live, where you play, where your church is, everything acts off of cause and effect relationships, okay? So when we're doing failure reconstruction, we have undesirable outcomes, and then we go backwards in time. So there has to be cause and effect relationships that occurred during that period of time. We have bad outcomes. We hypothesize what could have happened. We use evidence to say yes or no. We drill deeper. And as we'll get to in this presentation, we will uncover the physical root causes. We will delve deeper into finding a decision maker. Somebody decided to do or not do something. And then beneath that, we're going to say, well, why did they think it was the right thing to do? And that's going to get into these latent or system causes. But for right now, cause and effect is what I want to stick in your mind. That we have to do in this field, all of our fields, is we have to be systems thinkers. We have to understand processes. And the very basic tenets of a system are going to be inputs, transformation of whatever those inputs are, and the output is going to be a deliverable of some kind. So no matter where you work in a system. So when you're doing the root cause analysis type of work and the reliability type of work, I just want you to always say, where do I fit in this system? Because when I'm asking how could something have occurred, I'm going to be looking at those inputs. I'm going to be looking at, for instance, the packaging, the warehouse was full, so we had to stop production because we didn't have nowhere to put it. So those outputs affected my transformation of the product. We had to stop. So key concepts, cause and effect, systems thinking. Okay, and I want you to, this is going to be the crux of my presentation here, and I think that me and Heather tested the audio. These are very quick. These are like 5 and 10 seconds. But I just want you to see them and look at these from the standpoint of choices. Okay, that'll be the first one.
On the outside, yeah. I'll get a mall thread right off of this. Now that
There's
is genius. No need to tie off. No need. We're monkeys. Hopefully they're closer to the monkey than I am, because that's true. On the outside of the scaffolding, not one harness. Nope. Not one safety line. Not one idiot up there saying, hey, we need to be tied off. That's stupidity right there in its finest. I guess it's good that they're working on a hospital. Because, gee, criminy.
I'm thinking the red jacket's probably the supervisor. That and cleanup going up. I just really enjoyed the narrative on that. Okay, and the last one, it's kind of an older video, but the graphic is a tugboat pushing a ship into alignment. And the anchor is dropped on the tugboat. So these are three very different circumstances, and I'm narrowing this down to the human being. And that's what I really want to get out of this, is that I don't really care where you work, is that we're getting down into choices that people make, because what they do is they trigger physical outcomes to be observable. Okay, we're going to talk more about these. Okay, where do undesirable outcomes come from? Okay, how do we accurately determine the causes, the circumstances leading up to any undesirable outcome? I was going to ask, and let's put this in the chat. At your facility, something is analyzable. What triggers us to do an investigation? I just want to see what some of the things that people come up with. What makes something analyzable? Oh, come on. Somebody's got to put something in here. All right. I have some folks typing. Now, Heather, I'm not seeing these messages if they're coming up. I'm seeing people typing.
Yeah, it looks like everyone's still just typing. Oh, there's a couple.
Okay. Thank you, folks. Personal injury or production stoppage. Absolutely. Anything with a measurable outcome. Okay. I'm going to come back to that measurable outcome. A chronic failure makes it analyzable. Injuries or dead stock. Okay, in that line of work. Okay, it becomes analyzable when an accident occurs. Okay, you're following in line with where I was going, because what analyzable means is that in your organizations, if you have any essence of an RCA effort, it's going to be a trigger. Okay, and triggers are usually set high so that it's really too late from the standpoint of the failure has occurred and you've had bad consequences. So there's usually an unexpected downtime threshold, so many hours that we were down in a certain period of time. A lack of regulatory compliance. We have a violation. This is when I always say the suits show up, we're in trouble. And then the SIFs, as well as the slips, trips, and falls, which are going to be reportable or not. Well, oftentimes the trigger is going to be that they are reportable, but certainly SIFs, or serious injuries and fatalities, are going to be looked at. Okay, so that's the point that I want to make, is about analyzable means that you really have hit a high level already to be able to look at it, but there's no reason that we can't look at other failures before they hit that threshold. Okay, so keep that in mind. I'm going to go off on a little tangent here, and I'm going to, I did a presentation one time called Facebook Safety, the Illusion of Being Safe. And this was related to the fact that, a lot of times we have the OSHA reports in the US, we've had so many days without an injury. Well, does so many days without an injury make you safe? And then with my colleagues in the safety, it got me to thinking about different situations to determine if we're safe or not. Say this is a minefield. The goal is to get from point A to point B. Is because I made it through that minefield, does that mean that I'm safe? does that mean that the next tank or troop, whoever comes through, is going to be safe? The answer is no, because that just means that we've avoided the minefields. Okay, but the risks of going through the minefield are still there. So if we had the big OSHA board over here and saying we're 365 days without an injury, does that make us any safer if the risks are still there? This is a bit, I'm not asking for a judgment here, because this is a very contentious type of topic in the safety world. Let me take the same thing here and go ahead and say we're drunk drivers. Okay. The difference here is that, you know, there's some level of intent here, is that I know I'm taking a risk. But because the fact that I took this route home and I avoided where the police were, does getting to the other side make me, is that a success? Does that make me safe? Again, the point I'm making here is just because we got through some risks doesn't mean that the risks don't exist anymore, that they could be still hit by other people. Okay, food for thought. All right, there's different schools of thought on root causes and contributing factors. And again, I'm not going to make a judgment. I always leave these type of presentations, I leave it up to you to be the judge. I just put in what I see as relevant facts. A lot of times we often, there's schools of thought with behavior-based safety, which would say that it's always the person. They didn't follow our rules. We have rules and they didn't follow our rules. So therefore we take discipline. That's another paradigm in the safety world, is that's what safety is about, is that, you know, we go find out, we make sure we have the right rules, and if they didn't follow them, they're violators, and then we discipline them. So that's a blame situation. Is it the environment they work in? Is, you know, so I followed a procedure. The procedure was obsolete, which is because of the system that I work in. We never updated it with new technologies. Am I at the fault there, or is the system at fault there? Certainly, I was doing what I thought was the best thing in the interest of the where I work. Okay, or is it both? And I'm from the is it both community, and it all depends on context. Okay. Okay, in these situations, are these analyzable? Well, this first one, this fellow wasn't paying attention, and if he hit somebody else in front of him, then it's probably going to be analyzable from a legal standpoint, because it's probably going to be a court case or some type of legal situation. In this second window here with the scaffolding, tell me whether you think that this would be analyzable. At your organizations, if that was going on and no one was hurt, would that be considered something that we would take a look at? Okay, I got a few people typing in here. Okay, Paul, hey Paul, how you doing? If you recognize it and you do that, yes, it would be analyzable. And Andy is also saying 100%. But I want to put some context on this, because do you think that this is the first time that these people have ever done this? And I just say this from an investigative background, is that there's no one worried about anybody seeing them here. If I was analyzing this, part of what it would be, I'd be looking at is the fact to say that these people, they're very comfortable with doing this. And if that's the supervisor, you know, he's just batting cleanup, like I said. So that's part of looking at this, as to, this should be analyzable, but I fear in most cases that it's not, because it becomes the cost of doing business and normal practice. Only when somebody is hurt as a result of doing this will we be hypocrites and then go ahead and discipline people for doing this, when they've been doing it openly for years. Okay, this over here on the tug is that, you know, it's certainly going to be analyzable, because there's going to be liabilities involved here. But there's missing context. We don't know what was going on. We don't know whether that anchor was told to be let go, or whether there was a malfunction that allowed it to let go. We don't know whether the communication between the tug and the boat was that they even knew that they were there. So there's context that's missing, and that's key to what I'm going to be going through. Context rules. Okay, so how do we properly analyze such things? My friend Keith Mobley, who wrote Maintenance Fundamentals, this is a quote that not a lot of people agree with. Well, I'll say not everybody agrees with, but I do. There are a few things in life that you can absolutely be sure of, but one of them is that nothing ever just happens. There is always cause and effect relationships. There is always a reason for everything, including failures. There are no random failures, just our inability to look deep enough to find the causes. And I put the clocker there because that's the way that I've always felt, is that every time the hand moves, there's cause and effect relationships going on around the world, so that you're going backwards in time, that, you know, things happen at different points in time, they happen. And those are under the cause and effect relationships. All right, a common perception of RCA, and I'll go as far as to say a misperception of what I consider RCA, is that RCA is a commodity and that all RCA is the same. Unfortunately, in the general populace, the 5 whys is what most people see as RCA. And, you know, right or wrong in what people believe. But this gives the people the feeling that failure happens linearly, that it always happens in a straight line, that we always are just asking why, and that we always have one root cause. I'm 36 years in, done thousands of these RCAs, and never had one with one root cause. So this is the kind of the paradigm that we have to fight against every time when people say to do an RCA. So I want to go through and say why I feel that technically 5 whys is not consistent with being able to be applied successfully to complex, serious events. First of all, what's the difference between asking how, can, and why? Well, there is a big difference. And to me, it's not just semantics. It's the primary difference in how we conduct RCA as opposed to others. If I asked you the question, how can a crime occur versus why a crime occurs, your answers are going to be very different. And it's going to be the same in our working environments. If we say, how can a bearing fail versus why a bearing fails, it's going to be very different. But let me go through and let me prove it. Okay, I view this is going to be an investigation going backwards, and look at this from the standpoint of being an hourglass. And I'll actually put that graphic up in a minute. All this stuff here in the orange, let's say that this is the undesirable outcome, the consequence. We move backwards from that, and the evidence at the scene is going to represent our failure modes. It is what it is. We just don't know why it is that way. So we have to go back and we have to continue asking how can till we identify these physical roots. Just understand that everything in this orange space deals typically with the physics of failure. Okay, this is the stuff that we can see. But inevitably, we will come to a human being that made an error of omission or commission. Okay, and if we stop and just blame the decision maker and we stop our analysis here, then we are not interested in understanding why they thought that was the right decision. And this is the whole purpose of this presentation, is to introduce human performance and human and organizational performance factors. Is that the RCAs shouldn't end with the person, they should begin with the person. The decision maker is not the cause of most of these bad outcomes, but they're the victims of poor systems. So if we don't go exploring and understanding why on that day they thought it was the right thing to do, we're going to end up analyzing this again, because we're not getting the roots out. We're just mowing the lawn and the weed is still there. So from my standpoint, stopping at the physics of failure in this orange area or stopping at the decision maker is more consistent with a shallow cause analysis, not a root cause analysis. If we're doing true root cause, we're delving down into understanding the latent and organizational systems deficiencies, the workplace cultural influences, because our cultural norms, I guarantee you on the scaffolding, that was a cultural norm. That is not the first time that those people did that. They were way too open. Nobody was looking around to see if anybody else was looking. Matter of fact, the boss was crawling up with them. And then we'll talk briefly about socio-technical factors, which they get outside the fence of your organization. All right, we call these physical in the orange. The decision itself is the human, and the green stuff down here where your meat is going to be the latent roots. Internally, we deal with system deficiencies and cultural norms, and then externally, we deal with socio-technical stuff. All right, up here in the physics, it is very appropriate in the physical sciences because they're more finite to continually ask how could. And just think of that when I talked about how can a crime occur and how can bearings fail and things like that. When I say how could, I want all of the possibilities, okay? And because of the physical sciences, they don't change that much. I can come up with a pretty good listing of those hypotheses. But once I get to the decision maker, I'm not interested in how could they make a decision because there's an infinite number of possibilities. I'm interested in that person, that day, why they thought it was the right thing to do. My questioning shifts when I get to the decision maker to why. I'm between the ears of this person, and I want to understand why on that day that well-intentioned person made that decision. And I guarantee you, if we do this right, we're going to find out that anybody else on any given day would have done the same thing, and that this person has made that decision before and been praised for it. Okay. Keep that graphic of this hourglass in your mind. The skinny part here is the decision. Everything above it is the physics. Everything beneath it is the social science stuff, the soft stuff. Okay, all I want you to get from that graphic is that from the decision maker, until there's an output of a decision, that stuff will become observable. Once I make a decision, those cause and effect chains have been started, and I can see them, okay? Going backwards and looking at human reasoning, I can't see what's going on in somebody's head, okay? So that's why it's appropriate up here to say how could. I mentioned this earlier, and it's appropriate to switch the questioning to why, because I can't get into reasoning. I can't see reasoning, okay? These are inputs to our decisions, and our decisions themselves deal with outputs. All right, dispelling the myth of linearity in RCA. The events are going to be the reasons we care. They are facts. The modes are going to be typically the physics of the failure. The stuff we could see. We see that the pump failed. We have a death due to a chemical exposure, ammonia release. But to dispel linearity, all we simply do in RCA is that we use Boolean logic. If I'm asking how can, I could have and/or symbols up here saying, well, it could be resonance, it could be misalignment, and/or imbalance. So it's not linearity here. 2 of these could be true. 3 of these could be true. And then a Boolean, continuing to use Boolean, I have an and symbol. How can I have a fire? Well, you know the fire triangle. I need oxygen, fuel, and ignition source. They all have to happen. And then there's binary on the Boolean logic, the stuff that's yes or no. The valve was open or the valve was closed. So if you're in your reconstruction of your RCAs, if you're going through this, we're not looking at linearity. We're looking at all the possibilities, and the evidence says what's true and what's not. If I was applying the 5 whys in here, and you do it in your own minds, go ahead and tell me in the first clip here, well, for all 3 of them, just start throwing out. The motorbike one, what would you say was the cause for the 5 whys? And the scaffolding, if you said, what was the conclusion of your 5 whys? What was the cause? Same for the tugboat. Okay. Just give it a whirl in your mind and say, where would you end up? Where would you conclude? Well, I don't have a lot of interest. No, not interest. Not a lot of people that are typing on this. But if I say that the motorbike, and I go backwards, and eventually we're going to say that he was distracted, and we're going to say, why was he distracted, and who knows what's going on in his phone. But this is certainly not the first time that he's done that. So that becomes factors when you're saying why. There's going to be multiple things. There's going to be, he was very comfortable doing this on his phone and riding the motorbike. He didn't, in terms of, he wasn't following the law. I'm sure that there's laws that forbid this, and you can see that there's a turning lane in there. So he wasn't paying attention to the road signs either. These folks over here, again, we don't know context in the scaffolding, because they're going up there and they're going to. I could conclude that this is a cultural norm, and I could go further and say, well, why? Because they're probably getting up there and they're getting the job done faster. They're going to end the project faster, and they're getting praise for that. So that becomes a management system issue. Is that they're actually being encouraged for this kind of behavior. Over here, and again, we don't have context in this, but in this, maybe somebody's chasing this guy in a motorbike. Maybe there's an active shooter in this hospital, and these guys are hauling up to the top. Maybe on the boat side over there, that they think that the boat has explosives, okay, and that they're minimizing the damage that's going to occur to the ship. Again, we don't know at this point. But it's rarely, if ever, going to be one thing. There's going to be multiple factors that converge. Oops. Okay. What I do know is in the majority of RCAs that we see completed at sites of running around for decades doing this, is that a lot of people consider an RCA and conclude it that the parts broke. Okay. And then we go ahead and we either replace the vendor or we blame the supplier or whoever the case may be. And if they get deeper than that, then we choose to blame people. Okay. And unless, like I said earlier, if you blame people and that's your scapegoat, you're not going to get a lot of help in RCA. It's not going to be effective, and you're just going to keep having failures that are going to be higher in magnitude. All right. Now let's take a case and let's look at what do I mean by that when I go from the physics to the social side. If I ask how could a bearing fail, as opposed, again, why typically means that I want one answer. But if I say how could the bearing fail, well, there's 4 different ways a bearing can fail, and now I'm going to go get my evidence, and it's going to tell me which 1 or 2 of these are true. Okay, I have proof that it fatigued. If I go ahead, I could have just stopped at the fatigue and go ahead and replace the bearing and had a discussion with the vendor or supplier about the quality of the bearings provided to them. Okay. But if I go deeper and I'm interested in how it fatigued, I would look at, well, how could that happen? Well, I could have resonance, looseness, imbalance, and it could have been misaligned. Again, I get my evidence, I look in this, and I find out that this person who aligned on that equipment at this startup, they didn't know how to do it. Okay, that they lacked the knowledge to go ahead and to align properly. Now, if I go ahead and just discipline this person, then is the problem go away? No, the problem won't go away, because the bigger question here is, why did that person on that day think that that was the proper way to align? This is the key to understanding why undesirable outcomes occur. Understanding truly, and we take an interest in a non-accusatory way of why people felt it was the right thing to do. Okay, so how do we incorporate this human stuff? This is from a researcher, an academic, Karsten Bush. This kind of binary thinking may lead to throwing out the baby with the bathwater and wholesale rejection of traditional principles. For example, when adepts of the new view of safety reject root cause analysis or the bow tie, which is a form of it. But this is the key here. Instead of dismissing and preaching to stop using RCA altogether, a better approach may be teaching about the limitations of the approaches, which this just means that there's a lot of great tools out there that are just abused. They're not being used properly. So therefore, we just blame all of RCA and say, it's not useful. It is useful when used properly. Okay, so when I was looking at the misalignment before, if I chose to go deeper, which I'm heavily encouraging, I would be interested to say, so well, why were they misaligning? Well, let's check their tools. Let's check their qualifications. Let's check management oversight to understand why was somebody in a position that was not qualified. How come we didn't know that? In this case, because I know which one this is, somebody retired and he was just a helper at the time, and he had seen him do it, but nobody ever trained him how to do it. They just gave him the tools and said, go out and do good. Environmental issues, the training we talked about, standard operating procedures. How often do we upgrade technologies and then we don't go in and upgrade the procedures and the policies? Okay, so what I want to get across here is you really want to drill down past the person and understand put your eyes in their head at the time and see what they were facing at the time. This is the work environment. Okay, there's things, and you'll probably start hearing about it in our industries because typically from research, I think it takes about 15, 18 years before it actually gets into practice. They're coming up, they're called HOP teams, human and organizational performance, and they're calling them learning teams. But their purpose is to take it from that human root area, that decision, and in a very non-personal and non-threatening way, to take people through how their day started and whatnot, and go ahead and determine everything that led up to them making that decision. And you will uncover all of these things. They're much more, I'm still learning in this field, but they're much more adept at going and just questioning in a very respectful manner, as opposed to an interrogation room. Let me see here. All right, I want to go ahead and see if I can get this. I want to give you some examples now. This is an employee that fell and went ahead and broke their arm. They fell over, they slipped on a broken pipe that was in a walkway. Okay, so the event in this case is a reportable injury. Remember, my failure mode was that the employee fell and broke his arm, so that was a fact at the scene. I say, how could that have happened? Well, they could have been struck by a moving object. They could have slipped on a slick surface, or they could have tripped over something. Evidence comes back in, says that they tripped over something. We say, how could they have tripped over something? And there was a piece of pipe was on the floor in the walking path at the intersection. Okay, I'm saying, how could a piece of pipe have been there? The debris was left behind after a repair project. Well, how could debris have been left behind? Now, the oranges represent decisions and choices. The contractor did not perform a job completion inspection when leaving the site. The company project manager failed to conduct the visual inspection before signing off on the project completion. So this is a dual right here, a dual purpose contribution. But I want to dig deeper, and I don't want to just blame someone for making the decision, which was very easy to do, to have a scapegoat. But I want to know why. When I get to orange at the brain, remember my little brain picture, I'm saying, why did that person that day think it was the right thing to do? Inadequate internal emphasis to return to work area, to return the work area back to a safe condition. The company overwhelms the contracted forces with unscheduled add-in work during project outages. So they're actually creating this problem and encouraging people to take shortcuts. Now, the project manager failed to conduct the visual inspections. Why? It was an accepted practice to trust the contractor's verbal report on an as-left-in condition at the work site. So you can see that when you know these decisions really made logical sense now that we've delved deeper into understanding the reasoning. Okay. I think, let me see. All right. Many of you have probably seen me use this one before, but it makes my point. Let's take a mechanical example. That was a safety one. Unexpected downtime due to this pump failure. That pump has failed because of the shaft, the bearing, and the motor before. In this case, we're looking at the bearing because it costs the most. How can a bearing fail? Erosion, corrosion, fatigue, overload. Evidence shows the grayed out stuff is not true, obviously. How can I have fatigue? Thermal, mechanical. Evidence proves mechanical. How can I have mechanical? High vibration. How can I have high vibration? Resonance, misalignment, imbalance, and looseness. How can I have misalignment? It could have been misaligned at installation or misaligned. It was aligned properly and then became misaligned in operation. All right. Now I'm going to say, why would somebody align like that? Why would they not do it properly, especially if you're watching? And then you come to that and you say, well, the less than adequate training for the mechanic. He was assuming duties due to retirements. Less than adequate alignment tools provided to mechanics. They're giving me old stuff. Less than adequate oversight to observe the lack of qualifications before assigning to the field. So this is management oversight. How come we didn't know somebody was in a position that wasn't qualified? Okay. Let's see back here. Okay. So I wanted to give you a couple of examples in that of just going through and carrying that logic from physical to human to latent. If we stop at the physical side, then we're just going to be parts replacers. You'll be doing RCA again. If you stop at the human side and blame people, nobody's going to play ball with you anymore, and it's going to happen again. Only when you get into understanding the systems that people rely on and fixing them will these go away. All right, this is the traditional views of RCA, safety, and reliability, and this represents our challenges ahead because they're marketing problems. We need a facelift. We need a marketing facelift. Most people outside of our business see RCA as only being necessary on things that are broken. In hindsight, they're reactive, and there's these big high visibility things. That's the farthest thing from the truth. In a perfect world for me, I would know we were making some headway after this long in the business, is that there's no reason you can't be doing RCAs proactively. Go ahead and take any of your risk assessments like FMEAs, do a Pareto cut of them, and start doing, take those 20% of the risks representing 80% of your, the 20% of your failure modes that represent 80% of your risk. And go ahead and start doing RCAs on unacceptable risk. Why wait for it for the consequence to occur? Why is the risk so high? Safety. Most people's traditional view of safety is going to be that it's compliance based. It's hindsight as well in perspective. It's a negative connotation. It's blame centric because the first thing, and this is my personal experience, is that when you have something like that happen, everybody goes to the paperwork first and says, did we have the rules in place for this person to have done things right? Once you find out from a liability standpoint that you're in the clear because regulatory wise you had the paperwork in, then we go out and say who violated our rules, and then that way we try to find a scapegoat. And then the traditional view of reliability, I have to give it to my colleague Gareth here, who put up a lot with me from the safety field. Gareth is And their view of reliability, and me and him were just miscommunicating. It was primarily me, because I have always viewed reliability as equipment, process, and human related. The human component has always been a part of our reliability approach for going on 40, 50 years now. So I just automatically assumed everybody else thinks the same thing, but they don't. And it took him to beat me with a bat for me to understand this, because I said, well, what do you think reliability engineering is? He said, I would assume reliability is normally about hardware and components rather than people. And that is the prevailing opinion of reliability of people outside of the reliability business. And that we have to be able to incorporate these social sciences. And he even proved that to me, because I went to Wikipedia and the definition of reliability engineering certainly was mechanical in nature. So I had to eat crow on that, and it was all my fault. So in conclusion with this, are safety and reliability a choice? I'm going to say absolutely that they're a choice, but the people, the research side of this would say that the choices deal with conscious and subconscious, and that most of our decisions are made by our unconscious, okay, because they become automatic. So we don't have to reason as much with those, because we're automatically going to take a skill-based action, because we do it so routinely that it becomes automatic. But the choices do occur, and the choices trigger physical observable things to happen. What I'm hoping to get through in this particular presentation is for people to recognize, to get beyond the decision maker and understand reasoning. In every type of investigation, root cause, problem solving, whatever you want to call it, is that we get away from who made the decision and understanding why they made the decision that day. Okay, these things called socio-technical factors, I'm not going to get into them today. I'm just going to introduce them to you. But if we went deeper, I always consider this as the plant gates. if I'm doing an RCA and I want to deal with things that I have control of. So if I have to go outside the gates, then I'm not going to go ahead and explore that. But what I mean by socio-technical factors are, Congress and the legislature, the regulatory agencies that affect the rules that we have to follow, unions, insurance companies, OEMs, courts. So these are all things that, if we're in the plant, and I rarely find anybody who wants to get outside of the latent side into socio-technical unless there's a legal liability involved. Okay, but these are certainly factors that do affect our organizational systems. Okay, so I conclude with this, the 5 principles of human performance, and this is coming out of that HOP community that I was telling you about. And what I mean by progressive safety people are the ones who are looking at the environment with people work in, and the influence of systems on people's decision making. And I'm looking at holistic reliability as equipment, process, and human reliability. All right, these are inevitable facts. People make mistakes. The absence of error is death. So, I mean, we are going to make mistakes. We have to be able to compensate for them. We have to be able to fail safely so that people don't get hurt. But we have to build a resilience to say that people are going to make mistakes. We hope to make fewer mistakes through this type of thinking, but nonetheless, we're not error-free. Blame fixes nothing. We have to accept that, and that is a fact. Learning and improving is vital. If you don't learn from these incidents like this, then you're going to keep repeating them. Context drives everything. Don't look at people and say, if I was in that position, I would have never made that stupid decision. If you look in the context, most of the time, we're going to say that we would have done the same thing. And how you respond to failure matters. Many in there said that scaffolding that you would have done an RCA, which is great. Prevailing, what I see is that nobody would have done an RCA on that. because it was the way they did business. So recognizing where these potential opportunities are is key. Okay, so are reliability and safety a result of choices? That's up to you. I just wanted to lay out the cases that I've been involved with, in terms of research and academia and the people that actually do the work. And these are some of the things that I come across. Okay, this is just a plug for my friend Luke Marino today, who does a live broadcast called Lifecycle Live today at 4. And these are some links to Luke, and I'm sure you can find this either on his LinkedIn or on the maintenance community. And other than that, I think I'm up for Q's and A's.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bob. I know it's kind of a new topic, or maybe a little bit different as we've talked about before, but I have a question for you. I'm not seeing any in the chat, so if you have any questions for Bob, please feel free to fire them off now. My question for you is with this kind of maybe not so new, but maybe new to this kind of industry and this world, what does the future look like of including this kind of human component in safety and reliability kind of understandings? Kind of a big question, but
I think if we don't start accepting and delving deeper into this, that we're not going to see our undesirable outcome or failure rates dropping heavily, because these type of systemic things contribute to more than the failure that you're working on. Just take, for instance, if you were working on off of a procedure that was obsolete because it hadn't been updated due to new technology. Well, you're not the only one following that procedure. Procedures aren't made for one person. They're made for a population. So unless we get into the roots, and if you can just physically put that in your mind about the stuff that's underground, if you're not getting into that, then we're just going to get more practice in doing the RCAs, and probably poorly because we're not doing them correctly, as in that statement in Karsten's book. I think that people have to recognize the limitations, and he's right, whoever that quote was from, that if you think that 5 whys is the greatest thing since sliced bread for using on complex, serious events, then it's you're not going to make a lot of headway. And it's not saying that there's not a purpose for 5 whys. It's not valuable, but just in the linear logic itself, as a technical constraint, you're not able to express parallel paths of failure. And most of the time, as you all know from working in the field, there can be 2, 3, 4 different paths of failure that converge at any given point to cause a bad thing to happen. But they all failure. I wish it happened linearly. It would be a lot easier to do these RCAs, but unfortunately, it doesn't.
Well, I find it really interesting, so I appreciate you sharing your view. We did just get a couple of questions in. One question here from Raul says, why is this culture not being accepted widely?
Raul, we could do an RCA on that, couldn't we, buddy? It's not for lack of that the research is there and that it proves it. And like I said, I've been doing this for decades, and it's just because there's not a regulatory driver to get to that level of depth, that this is a leadership issue from my standpoint. If you want your RCAs to be of better quality, then educate your managers on how to evaluate and assess an RCA. Because when they start rejecting RCAs because they didn't go deep enough, that's when you'll start getting better RCAs, because people won't come back a second time and want to be rejected again. That's a great question. I just think that this is a personal initiative. It's not like it's lacking science to back it up. A lot of this is common sense to me. But if I can get by with doing less work and I turn in an RCA that's substandard and it's acceptable, why would I? Why would I do anything better?
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Next question here is from Volker. It reads, does zero harm process equal defect elimination process?
I know where Volker's coming with on this, and it's a very contentious subject. Well, my answer is going to be to that is no, because zero harm is a contentious topic, because it's in the worlds of the debate, it's saying that the ones against it are saying it's unrealistic. You will never attain zero harm. So why try to shoot for something that you can't and that you can't attain? But when you go for that, what happens when a plant manager sets a zero harm goal is in the eyes of everybody else, that's a metric that can be manipulated now, and nobody wants to be the one to mess the metric up. So what that does is it forces unreporting, is that people will just stop reporting the harm in order to preserve the metric. Okay. Now I'm not a fan of the zero number for the reasons that they're citing, but I'm also a fan of saying striving, not making it a goal, an attainable goal. Let everybody know it's not going to be attainable, but I'd rather shoot for zero than for a tolerance level of, say, 5. We can only harm 5 people this year. I mean, picture 2 hospitals next to each other in a community, and one of them has a zero harm goal, and the other one says, well, we're only going to kill 5 people this year. Which hospital are you going to? I'm not going to say that you're going to be able to attain the goal, but it's aspirational. So,
yeah, really interesting. Next question here. I see 2 more in the chat. We'll try and get through in the next couple of minutes. 2 more. One from Mohammed reads, what can reliability engineers do to maintain a safe environment in a mining plant?
It's a great question, and my answer is going to be very generic, because as you can see, I operate on principles. When I talk about undesirable outcomes, and I talk about physical, human, and latent, I'm really in the critical thinking business. The undesirable outcome is irrelevant to me, because I deal in hospitals, I deal in mines, I deal in power plants, I deal in schools, things of that nature. It's just that their bad outcomes are different things. But the way that you think through that is going to be the same. And if you're in the mining, I do a lot with mining. If you're in the mining companies and you have control and or influence over the quality of RCAs, that's what you can do, is that you can demand that they meet a certain quality criteria, and that they get beyond the decision maker, and that they start investigating the organizational systems. Now, investigating organizational systems comes at a risk, because if your organization is not progressive, and you are, then your leadership will take that as blaming them. Because say you found that procedure thing I keep referring to, say it was written by your boss's boss, and now you have to go ahead and fix it and cite it in a root cause that this obsolete procedure in place was a contributor to this failure. That becomes risky. That's why I advocate that we should have RCA champions in place, who are people in authority that will be a confidant, because I want to be honest and I want to be candid, but I also want to be employed. So these kind of people go ahead and they work the politics for us. Get something done while staying employed.
Awesome. Next question here, and last question, I believe, for today. Is there a reliability matrix for measuring your KPI?
Well, I'm going to take it out of the realm of reliability, because that's so broad. There are certainly matrices for determining whether you have an undesirable outcome worthy of an RCA or not. And the standard heat maps, about probability and severity apply to that. Certainly in the red zones of a heat map, you're going to do a much more detailed investigation, as opposed to, I forgot who brought up defect elimination, which is typically the chronic stuff that doesn't rise to a threshold of a trigger. that stuff may be stuff that, maybe I do a 5 whys and a fishbone on that. I don't have to go to that much depth. If I was using KPIs for an effective RCA system, I would look at leading indicators. And some of those to me are going to be, what are the number of RCI, what are the RCAs that you are having to repeat? Okay. Most people don't collect that. Another one is how many RCAs are you doing on proactive instances versus reactive? Because theoretically, the more RCAs you're doing on high risks, you're preventing them from materializing. So I should see fewer need to react with RCAs. So those are 2 KPIs that I think would be helpful if you were interested in being leaders of the pack for sure.
Awesome. Well, really great answers, thoughtful answers for our audience questions today, Bob. I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you once again, everyone, for joining us. I enjoyed the presentation a lot. I hope you did as well. And I will see everyone next time. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Feel free to give me any questions.
Bye.